I'm Todd Roberts. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I'm part of the class of '79. I ended up at Verde Valley School by two Verde Valley School people, Junie and Annie Lockhart. One graduated, the other one did not graduate, but they both loved the school. My dad was working with them on a film, and they came up to the office one day of my dad's offices and said, heard my dad and I talking about prep schools and so on, and they said, what school are you talking about? And he said, oh, well, we're talking about sending Todd away to a prep school, and his mother and I, and they said, well, which one? And before my dad could even answer, they said, well, we went to Verde Valley School, and that's where he needs to go. And my dad was like, I don't know Verde Valley School. I've never heard of Verde Valley School. Where is Verde Valley School? And at that point they said, well, it's in Sedona, and it's the most beautiful setting. It's the most unique place for learning and education on the planet, and that's where he should go. And my dad, being my dad, was a little suspect of it all, and said okay, and reached out to the people that were placing me, this placement service, and they brought up Verde Valley School. He brought up Verde Valley School to them, and they said, oh, well, yeah, we know Verde Valley School. So he said, well, why didn't you bring up Verde Valley School to us? And they gave whatever the answer was. I don't remember really what he said their answer was, but they were like, it's a great school. And the next thing I know, my dad and I are in a car driving up to Verde Valley School, and I met the first person I met there was Pam Ropp, and who ran the horse program, and my dad had called ahead because when we stayed at a motel down the road, and my dad was trying to sell me on this whole concept, and he said, I played basketball in high school, all through junior high, all through grammar school. That was one of my sports, my main sport. And he said, do you guys does your basketball team do well? And Pam Ropp said, are you kidding? We win the whole conference every year, which was a complete and utter unadulterated lie. Verde Valley School never won. They were great in the soccer sport, and the soccer team did very well, but in basketball not so much. But my dad said exactly what she said. Oh God, they win all the time. And as soon as I got to Verde Valley School, I was talking to anybody I could talk to on campus about the basketball team, and people were looking at me like, what are you talking about? And I, no, the basketball team, right? They win. I mean, who's on this team? And everybody's like, the basketball team. Some people didn't even know there was a basketball team. Other people were like, they never win. Well, the first student I met who interviewed me was Carol Branch. And Carol Branch was, there's so many ways to do this. First of all, Carol Branch was a very good athlete. She was an unbelievable student, excelled, very smart. She was, I felt at home because she was, you know, coming from LA and going to public schools on and off through my life, and private schools as well, but she was a pretty young black gal who had an afro, so I felt like I was at home in LA in a way. And she was very friendly to me and could not have been nicer, and but very low-key, not at all, you know, street or anything like that. And she was just funny and made me relaxed and so on. And I started looking around going, you know, I kept thinking I knew what this place was kind of going to be like based on where it was, and then the buildings, and you could see the horses as you drove up the road, and the pigs in the pig trough and all that stuff. But every time I kept thinking, oh, I figured this place out, it wasn't at all what I thought it was at all. in any way. So it kept just, you peeled back the onion, and each new layer of the onion was a new thing, a new story, a new experience. Yeah, my favorite place on campus was Babs Warren's kitchen, which is painted. Her daughter Leslie lives there now, and her son-in-law. It's painted in a 1950s car aqua blue greenish turquoise color. All the cabinets, they're metal, and they're painted like a 1950s Chevy truck. And the first time I ever walked in there, I just thought that was the greatest thing I could ever imagine. And the window that is framed off the wall there, where the kitchen table is, not the dining room table, that's another room, but in the kitchen table frames cathedral. It's a perfect, it's like a painting, and you can sit there and eat and look at that, and there's a lot. And that was another thing that it took me a little while, because I'm a little slow sometimes, but I started to notice that theme on campus, because the same picture window was in many different places. It was in the chapel, it was in the dining hall, it was in dorm rooms, it was in houses, it was in Maggie and Cliff's living room. Maggie and Cliff Perkins. He was the head of the history department, she was the head of the theater and English department. It was in so many different places on campus that it was almost like a, if you didn't know any better, you thought it was like you were in a Twilight Zone, because you kept coming across this same image. It was a very universal, almost like the logo. And when I was at Verde Valley School, it was the logo of the school. Cathedral was the logo of the school. Yeah. The sense of responsibility you're given from a work job, from a dorm job, that there's nobody there to clean up after you. You have to do it yourself. There's no excuse for not doing your dorm job and doing your work job. I came to school a little late, so my work job was, they didn't really have one for me. And Chris Warren kept giving me little odd jobs. This is before we were friends. He was my soccer coach, and he would tell me, you know, today you're going to go do this, or this week you'll be doing this, you're on this is your job, and it would just kind of, it was never any consistency. And then finally somebody had the job of the flagpoles, and they, for whatever reason, they couldn't do it. There was some physical issue, they couldn't do it. So he decided that was the perfect job for me. The problem with flagpoles was, the easy part was, it was always the same every day, so you never had to, there was no guessing involved. You could always get it right. The difficult part was you had to do it before breakfast. So that meant you had to get up early. You couldn't just get up whenever you wanted to, stroll into breakfast, into the dining hall, have your breakfast, and go off to class. You had to get up before all that, do the flags, and then come to breakfast. And Chris was Chris Warren was, that was just a thing for him, and that's the way you had to do it. But the thing that probably, and there were so many other things too in different classes I took. Terry Town taught a class of anthropology, and he taught a whole section in the class on the Narsarima, which is, if anyone who took that class knows what that is. And he told the story of the Narsarima, and we read the book The Forest People, which had an influence on me. The Narsarima had a tremendous influence on me as well. I won't spoil the story for anybody who doesn't know what the Narsarima are. But the thing that had the biggest influence on me, without a doubt, is the field trips, American Indian field trips, because I remember people were they didn't like where they got situated on field trip or what their field trip was. And Sean Owen we were in a community assembly in Brady Hall, and people were complaining about their field trip. I didn't want to go there, I wanted to do this, and I got stuck over here at this trip or that trip, and they were complaining, and that's what I really wanted to do, and that was going to educate me on this or that or whatever it was they were complaining about. They're trying to make their point. And Sean said, I hate to burst your bubble, but the whole point of field trips, you're missing. The point of field trips is to extricate you from your comfortable zone, whatever it is, wherever you are, and yank you out of that and put you in a place where you're uncomfortable, where you are the fly in the sugar bowl. And no matter how much you try to hide, you can't. So you're either going to, you're either going to make it work or you're not going to make it work. And if you don't make it work, the only one who's going to be miserable is you. Because everybody else, if you're on a wilderness field trip, everybody else is going to be making it work. So one way or the other, you're going to have one of two experiences. It's going to be really great or it's going to be really horrible. But either way, you're going to learn something, but you're uncomfortable either way. That's the whole point. So either get with it or, get out in a way. Emotionally, I guess you would say, or intellectually. So I got sent to Navajo, to a school, a government school, Indian reservation school, boys and girls, and I'm there, and we're there about, it was another pair of girls, and it was Carl, Alexander, and I, who was a very interesting guy. He was from about 158th Street in South Central LA, black, huge afro, wore an army trench coat, and I'm in Levi's from head to toe. So you've got a dime store cowboy and Superfly on the American Indian Reservation, trying to figure it all out. We had two girls at the school. The girls were on the girls' side, we were on the boys' side to kind of look after them and help out the faculty and so on. And after about 3.5 days, 4 days, the principal came to us and said, "So what are you guys going to do?" And we said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, school's closing for the holiday. We're all going home." And we were like, "What? We just got here 3 days ago. This is where we're supposed to be." So Carl and I scrambled and got ourselves in with this guy named Rocky, who was literally a tree with arms. He was the biggest human being I'd ever seen in my life. 100% Navajo, very sweet. He said, "You're going to come home with me and live with me in my house with my family, and you'll have your Navajo experience that way." So all of a sudden, the headmaster comes to us and says, "Your faculty's coming up here. They're coming up. They'll be here tomorrow to pick you up." And I called them, and I was looking for Cliff Perkins because he ran the field trip, that Indian field trips, and his mom had gotten sick, so he had to fly home to to Delaware. And I got his son on the phone, Jeff Perkins, who's still a faculty member, and he said, "Todd, Dad had to go take care of my grandmother, and we're coming to get you. That's it. There's no argument. It's done." And I said, "Well, we don't understand. We already have a thing set up." He goes, "That's great for you guys, but you don't have anything set up for the girls. And we're only coming up there once. We're making this trip. We're coming to get you and take you out." Well, I thought we were going to go home. That's the other reason I was fighting. I wanted a full field trip. So he comes and gets us, and they take us over to Oribe in Second Mesa and drop us off at Hopi. And it was a 10 times more of an experience than I could have ever experienced, because we ended up in the town where Thomas Barnackia lived. Thomas Barnackia was a Hopi priest, medicine man, Hopi shaman, whatever you want to call him. And he had come and spoken to us at school. They had given a you know, I forget what they call it, but we called it service. So we had, once every quarter, we had a religious service, different people. And he had come and talked, and I thought he was fascinating and very interesting guy. I got to chat with him a little bit. And so now I'm in his town, and I want to go see him. I want to go say hello to him because I thought he was such an interesting guy. I really looked at him as a prophet. And so I said to our mother and grandmother, we lived with a single woman who was a widow with her 9-year-old son and her mother at Hopi. And she said, well, I said, I want to go see, where does Thomas Bernanke live? How far is it from here? Could I walk to his house? And the two of them got really quiet. And me being naive and, or should I say pushy like I am, you know, you didn't answer my question. And the two of them looked up and said, Thomas Bernanke is not welcome in this house. He is not, he's not welcome here, and I don't want him in this house. And I was so shocked. And honestly, I was offended because this was Cliff's good buddy. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, he was the first and most notable conscientious objector in World War II in the Hopi tribe. And he was blacklisted throughout the entire town. And I was just completely aghast, and I was so upset about it that that night I walked from her house. She lived in town. We walked to the nearest Circle K or whatever it was, and I got on a payphone to call Cliff and tell him this, that Cliff, your buddy Thomas Bernanke is persona non grata here. I mean, and I couldn't get him on the phone, and we then became friends with his son, and which only made matters worse in our home with our Indian mother and grandmother. And but it was still the most unique experience for me because her boyfriend was one of the head mud head drummers, and he took us down into the kiva, and we got to sit and watch all 5 Kachina dances in a kiva on Walpi at Old Arribi. 3 years later, they shut it off to all Anglos. We're not allowed anymore up there. And about 10 years later, they shut it off to all non-Hopis. So what I saw was something that you don't get, it doesn't exist anymore. And when I came back and told Cliff, he insisted that I sit in his office with him and recite every story I could remember of the dances, because he collected Kachina dolls and had such a fascination with them, and had me literally recite every single twist and turn of that whole experience. And then we'd go through like a little bit of a chapter, let's say, and then he'd say, okay, now write all that down. And I'd write it down by hand, and that's how I wrote my paper for the field trip, which, not surprisingly, is why I got such a good grade on it.
I think I have to get this one.
So, but there are many, many, many other stories, and I have relationships from Verde Valley School that last to this day, that are big parts, big influences on my life, big parts of my life. Cliff Perkins, his wife Maggie Perkins, Babs Warren, who, although was not faculty, was one of the founders of the school. Darren Warren. Darren had I got to know Darren. She was like the first teacher, the first Warren I got to know, because she was having She was trying to start an acting class, and she couldn't start it. And then and I was trying to get into Maggie's acting class, but Maggie had a rule that her class had to be even numbered students. So there would always be pairs to do scenes. She didn't want monologues. She wanted you working with another actor. And Darren heard about me complaining that I wanted to get into an acting class, and she was trying to start an acting class but couldn't get, enough students for it. And Maggie said, "Todd, you're talented enough, but there's no room for you, so you'll have to wait till next year or next semester or whatever it was going to be." And Darren came to me and said, "I need you as much as you need me. So we're going to start an acting class." And next thing you know, she had 5 students who were ready to have a class, and I got to do that class, and that class was a very seminal experience for me, because I got to do stuff. It wasn't as structured as a normal class, so I got to pick what I wanted to do. So we did Long Journeys Day into Night. I did a scene from that. I did a scene from the Anne Frank story. I did the monologue of Mark Antony from Julius Caesar. So I got to do all this stuff. For me, it was like I was a kid in a candy store. Whereas with Maggie's class, it was very structured. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it's different. So it was a totally different experience. And you might say the first class was a warm-up to the second. But honestly, I expanded my instrument, which is what Maggie called it, and Darren called it, much more so than I would have expected to. Because so when I got to Maggie's class, I was completely a different actor, a different artist than I would have been prior to that. Sean Owen definitely had an influence on me. He taught a kind of sidebar film class, film appreciation class. He would screen films in Brady Hall, and he played for us certain films that some I knew and some I didn't know. Some that I knew gave me a whole new appreciation for those films. Two of the main films from that class were Two-Lane Blacktop with James Taylor, Warren Oates, and Dennis Wilson from the Beach Boys, directed by Monty Hellman. And the other one was the Wild Bunch, directed by Sam Peckinpah. And I had never seen Two-Lane Blacktop, but I loved it from the moment I saw it. But the Wild Bunch I had seen before, but he got me to look at it in a totally different way than I had ever looked at it before. It was, I went into it thinking it was a Western, and I came out of it looking at it as something totally different than that. Although it is a Western, but it's something different. Get a copy of both field trip papers. I wish I had them. I don't. Number 2, I should say another person who influenced me greatly, though I never met him, was Ham Warren, because I still try to live by his motto, "If my labor will serve you, I shall not withhold it." And that's something I try to live by to this day, among a few other things that I believe in. The Golden Rule and 10 Commandments and that as well. Treat those the same way you want to be treated. And Ham Warren. But I got to know him through people that had worked with him, and I got to know him through his children. So, what else? I guess the only other, I probably should have been a little more, I kind of look at my whole Verde Valley experience as if it was kind of, it's the wrong wording, I don't like but it was kind of perfect. I don't, you know, there's those couple of things that I mentioned, but you know, I did everything I wanted to do all the time. I achieved being on the trash crew, which was the work job that had the most esteemed, most highest profile, most envious work job on campus, flat out. Number one. Number two, I got to spend time with Pancho in the wood shop, who very few people will, I mean, the people from my area will remember him, or before me, but he was pretty old then. You know, fire runs, myself and Joe Perkins personally built every single torch for our senior class for both fire runs. We made the torches, we shaped the handles based on the number of females in the class, so their hands were smaller so they could grip them easier. There weren't sharp edges. We wrapped the torch at the top in wire and enough to where it didn't fall apart like they always fall apart. We took a lot of pride in doing all that. We stayed up night after night after night. I took a Taekwondo class. I took photography classes. You know, it was kind of like Shangri-La for me. It really was.
Visions